Well, so that's Cole's mug.
Yep.
This one's the one I typically drink out of, and then that's actually like my second one that my wife usually drinks out of. So
just in case my first one breaks down, I got one ready to go.
Yeah, it's really just a matter of semantics.
But we bought it for the podcast.
Yeah,
nice. I'm kidding.
I don't know, works out either way. But
so did you start to say you saw Guardians?
Yeah, last night.
Oh, beans! I haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
yeah.
dude,
it's good.
I'm a Guardians.
Yeah,
nut.
That's my jam. So, wife and I are huge Disney people. I hate roller coasters. Cannot stand them. I'll show you pictures later of my roller coaster face because it's a thing. And so went to Disneyland last September, and she was like, "All right, we're doing this one." I was like, "I'm doing this because I love the Guardians." She was like, "Not because you love me." And I was like, "Right now there's a hierarchy." And the Guardians are above it because I hated those drops in that, but being, fulfilling the Guardians-ness of it all.
That's sweet.
But I hate the drop.
I thought the movie was great.
I cried hard.
I've heard it's the best one.
It's great. It is an emotional drainer though. So like you're just, don't see it in the beginning of the day because you're not going to want to do anything the rest of the day.
Okay, yeah. Take the rest of the day off.
Yeah.
Got it.
Bat.
Usually cut to our little bumper intro.
Yeah.
When we're pouring.
Oh, I know. I listened to the show.
Okay. Yeah. That's
I
right.
was very self-conscious about what I was wearing because of the last couple of episodes.
You don't have to be self-conscious, my guy.
I was like,
Don't you worry about a thing.
I was like, I know you guys open your closet and it's like the exact same thing. You guys are like a cartoon.
It's true.
Everything
Just all black.
Mhm.
My whole closet's black.
You open up your dresser drawer and it's just all black jeans. That's all you have.
Just black everything.
Mm-hmm. All right, Cole. Because I love you, I'm going to try doing this without creamer.
Where's your creamer?
Oh,
dude?
I brought it. It's
okay.
down next to me.
I
Yeah.
see it. I see it.
Yeah. Try to keep it out of frame, but
It's heretical. Right. Thank you to our sponsor, Quickwater Coffee.
and Meyer Creamer.
And Meyer Creamer. Not a sponsor.
Thanks.
Do it dirty.
Do whatever you're gonna do with that. Well, welcome to the show, Keith.
Thanks.
Yeah, dude.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Keith is a homie, tech director at Berkley,
Mm-hmm.
husband, and father to a lovely doggo. Sparky.
Love my buddy.
Sparky's
Yeah.
great.
What kind of dog is he?
He's a boxer bulldog mix. Yeah, we got him. We did a DNA test. He's 100% good boy. But he's actually, there's a bit of pit bull in there, some staffy, a little bit of boxer. But he looks like Petey from the Little Rascals
Nice.
or Chase from Homeward Bound, depending on your age bracket.
That's awesome.
That's sweet. That's cool.
How old is he?
He is 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
He's a sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
He is the sweetest.
Sparky.
Dog.
He is super. He sounds intimidating from the street. I'll let Cole, who's come to my house many times, like attest to. He can sound really intimidating,
Yeah.
and then as soon as you come in my house, he is the biggest scaredy cat.
Like the biggest lap
Yeah.
dog.
I mean,
Like he will come up on the couch and like lay on you.
uh-huh.
and give you
if you have
kisses.
cheese, you can have anything in my house. He is not a protector by any stretch of the imagination.
That's so funny. It's so funny how that differs from dog to dog, like
Mhm.
what motivates them.
Mhm.
Some dogs will like drop whatever mood as soon as you wave a piece of cheese. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
so, like Storm is more like that, but Rosie, Amanda's parents, German Shepherd, is not at all food motivated. Like
Oh, weird.
whatever she wants to do, and the only thing that really gets her motivated is her frisbee. That's the only thing.
This dog's a little too into fitness.
Yeah, right. Tone it down.
Yeah.
Tone it down.
But we have an 8-month-old puppy at home, so that's been an adventure, and she's figuring out the world right now.
Yep.
Shout out Storm.
Storm.
Storm, if you're listening,
Storm.
you're a good girl.
Doggy podcast.
That reminds me of the Guardians dog.
Dude,
That
Cosmo
was-
was
Yeah,
great.
That was so funny. I loved it.
It
There's
was,
so
it was
many
really
good
funny.
movies.
It was really funny.
Oh, sorry, dude.
Yeah. Just
I'm kidding.
You usually see movies before me. What's going on?
I
dude?
know, man. I know, dude.
You used to go with Chags, huh?
I should.
mm.
I should.
He's leaving soon.
I know.
Where's he going?
Sad.
They're moving.
They're moving.
Oh,
to
really?
They're moving to Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nice.
They're Logan's parents live there. I
Mhm.
think they're
Chags is doing like online,
yeah.
getting his master's online, like theology.
You know he doesn't have to move to finish that, right? It is an online course.
Yes. They're like getting a sweet deal with his parents on their living situation. So
Nice.
they're like renovating their entire basement, and like it's like they have like a walkout, like massive
Oh, heck yeah.
condo basically for free every month. So it'll be good for them. Like I'm stoked for them. It's gonna be a good.
That was the first wedding we did together. Because
Yes.
I DJ'd that wedding,
Yeah.
and then Cole was shooting.
You DJ'd Logan and Kaylee's wedding
Uh-huh.
too, right? Yeah. Yep. And you're DJing Noah and Breeze.
I am.
Okay, good.
DJ Roomba.
It's yeah, the side hustle.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out Logan. I can't shout out my dog and not Logan after talking about his personal life on a podcast.
Chaggy.
No, it's there's priorities.
Absolutely.
And we know Chag listens too. So
Yeah.
we gotta
Exactly. That's what I was
tighten
thinking.
that
I'm
one
like-
up. Well, we're stoked to have Keith on.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming, and it was inevitable. You're gonna be on at some point.
You needed a at least a B level sub, and so I'm glad to tap in.
The real reason is you violate the code of conduct with Creamer in your.
I haven't put it in yet.
I know. I'm proud of you.
because I love you.
I'm proud of
going
you.
to.
Are you enjoying it or?
It is as far as a creamless coffee is going. It is higher on the enjoyable scale.
Amazing.
We'll take it. That's high praise.
Yep. That
Shout
is-
out Quickwater Coffee for that.
That's right.
Yes.
That praise.
Thank you, Steven.
Yep.
Go check out Quickwater, downtown Rockford. Steven air roasts all of his coffee. We're drinking a limited edition Rwanda coffee. He roasted 20 bags, and I went in and bought one, and it is fantastic. It's great. It's caramel, cocoa, and orange are the notes in this. And I was telling the guys before we started rolling that I had some of it yesterday, and it literally tasted like had a little like cube of caramel or like a Werther's caramel. It was very, very good. So
Yeah.
if you're into coffee, go check out Quickwater.
Or if you're into creamer, it also works.
It's a good base for the creamer.
Yes. It's a good canvas.
Quickwater is amazing coffee for a fair price and amazing atmosphere.
Yeah. Welcoming.
Everything's so pricey nowadays, but I don't know. I was really surprised by like just the $3
Well,
cortado. I
yeah.
was like, thank you.
And Steven just got his liquor license. So
Oh, wow.
we went in there yesterday and mom got like a
So this has
Pomona. Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, I made a joke about this being an Irish coffee podcast, and you made it so much closer.
Yes. But Steven did this. It was like cold brew, and I think like I forget what was in it. It was like cold brew and gin and like ice. It was like super good.
Are they gonna stay open late and do like?
I don't think so. It's more just like afternoon stuff
Okay.
from what I've heard from Steven. But yeah, he's got like a whole rack of like wine bottles and stuff in there. And he told me about this thing. Steven didn't make this, so credit doesn't go to him. But he wanted because I asked him about it and he was like, I didn't make this, but it's called a cold fashioned. So
Oh, yeah.
it's cold brew, and
Uh-huh.
like I haven't had one, and I'm so excited to try one.
It is it's a great mix for those of you who enjoy adult beverages and of the bourbon nature.
Mhm.
That sounds delicious.
That sounds
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, super good.
So, but here we are.
We should have an episode where we drink cold fashions.
Should just do a taste test episode. Just do
that
like
would be fun.
a cupping, like
Ooh,
that'd be
It's
sick.
Until It's Gone Nights.
After dark.
Yeah.
after dark. That's amazing.
So, Keith being tech director at Berkley, we've had many a talks and many a conversations about tech in the church world. And I guess why don't we start with you bringing us through how you got into doing tech stuff for the
Yeah.
church, like as a whole, and like your story into that
Yeah.
world.
We were texting back and forth a little bit, and it was like, what should we talk about? Like, and I was like, well, what soapbox do you want me to get on? Like, we could talk
we
about.
have a plethora.
We could talk about aliens. We could talk about Genesis. We could talk about Marvel, Apple, Star Wars, Ted Lasso.
We'll probably talk about all of them by the time we're done here.
Little. We've already hit the Marvel check. That's in our listening bingo.
Done. Keep going. We got a long list.
Yeah, right. So I started. I was actually thinking about that this morning. So I started in middle school. I went to Calvary Church growing up. Got dedicated by Pastor Dobson. And started in 6th grade on the middle school tech team. And so I'm pretty sure I've been wrapping cables over under longer than both of you have been alive.
Over under.
Yeah, it's the only way.
It's true.
And so I did that through high school, did stuff in high school. So I was in musicals, but then I also did like lights and sound for, other shows, other stuff at the school. Went to Western Michigan, got my undergrad in tech theater with an emphasis in audio. And then also ran sound for the School of Music while I was there too. So did a little bit of recording, not as much, but then ran sound for a group called Gold Company. So it's 16 singers, 8-piece band. We toured through like Indiana, did a whole bunch of shows around Michigan. I got to go to France with them with the sextet, which was super cool. And then,
is that a vocal group or is that a jazz group?
Vocal jazz.
Yeah, that's
so
what I thought.
The Venn diagram of both of those, it's like right in the middle.
That's cool.
Anyways, continue.
And then went to grad school at the University of Cincinnati for sound design for theater, and was there for about a year and a half. And while I was there, everybody was like, "Oh man, what internship are you doing? What are you doing this summer?" And I was like, "Not theater." Because I do this all year long. Like I get theatered out. And through this time, probably from Western on, I kind of stopped going to church for a bit. So there was definitely a bit of drift of just, there was probably like a year or two chunk where I didn't go to church a single time. It was the unfortunate but typical college story of like, I went to college, didn't go to church, did college things that were very far from going to church. But I had a really good friend of mine who was a worship leader, and he was the guitarist in Gold Company when I was there. And so he was a worship leader at this church, and he was like, "Hey man, we need some help with some audio stuff. Could you help?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I really don't wanna, but sure." Because the one thing that I've told to like students that I had when I was, a grad student or when I was an adjunct was like, you don't get to practice much when you're a live sound technician. Like you don't have that opportunity to be like, oh, I'm going to try to make myself better. Like if you're a recording engineer, all you're doing really is just kind of practicing. We're honing your craft as you go along. But because live is so unique in that it requires the performance, and yeah, you can multi-track and stuff now and play it back, but it's still different than like being in the moment. And so the thought I had is like, yeah, you get a group of volunteer musicians every week who are not the strongest. That makes you have to step your game up and be a better engineer behind the desk when you're mixing. So that's when I started working at that church, and they paid me a little bit for my time. They had a guy who was working for one of the local TV stations, and they had outfitted this with the most like 1990s TV studio stuff you've ever seen in your life. But that all needed to go because they were, renovating some stuff. So they hired me to like take all of that stuff out basically, but make sure the systems and everything were still working. So yeah, that kind of got my foot back in the church realm a little bit. But when I went to grad school, I didn't really go to church. But the whole thing that brought me back to Grand Rapids from Western and then University of Cincinnati was when I was at Western. I was Buster Bronco. I was the mascot. And then when I was working home at Summers in Grand Rapids, I was Crash for the Whitecaps for 5 seasons. So I got my enjoyment of working in minor league sports and the entertainment side of minor league sports. And so when I was in grad school, I was like, yeah, I think like that might be a better direction for me to go. I like sports. I like the entertainment side. I like, making people laugh. I can't be a mascot forever. There's only one Philly Fanatic. The guy's had that job for the last like 20 years. I was like, but I could do entertainment in minor league sports. So I got a job with the Dayton Dragons that summer. So I would drive an hour north from Cincinnati to Dayton, and I worked about half the games up there. And then I was also a beer vendor for the Reds that summer, which was it was still a great job. Like besides the weight of the beer bucket, it was like being a mascot without the costume, just like cracking jokes up and down the aisle. Like every vendor has their gimmick, and mine is that I was funny. So like I would figure out jokes, and yeah, if you came to like multiple games in a row, you'd hear the same joke over and over again, but like it worked.
You're like, oh, it's this guy again.
It's that guy. Yep. Yeah. Like, go down the aisle and I was like, I got 2 thumbs, or who's got 2 thumbs and needs a beer? I'd be like, if nobody said anything, I'd be like, this guy. And then, or like anytime we'd score a home run, I'd run down to the end of the aisle and it'd be like, celebratory beers. Who needs a celebratory beer? Or if the other team scored a home run, I'd be like, who needs a consolation beer? And like, that was the kind of stuff to just try to keep people to laugh. And then that was what got me sales, was people be like, all right, here's a pity beer. Like I'll give you $8 for that.
For this guy.
So then ended up leaving grad school early, got a job at the Whitecaps as their promotions manager, and was there for 2 seasons in the front office, was there during the fire when that happened, which was just bonkers.
I remember that.
Did the All-Star game, and then also, it's kind of fun going back to a game because I'll see some of the skits and some of the games that I created when I was there, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're still doing that. Like that's fun. Or Roxy, the girl mascot, that was something that we had in Dayton, was a girl mascot, and the little girls loved it. They had the merchandise. It was something for them. It's kind of like the Disney aspect of it, of being very like everybody has something that they can enjoy when they're at the game.
Yeah.
And yeah, they had Frankie, who was pink, and it's like, okay, kind of, but having that female mascot presence was awesome. So that was something that I kind of made come to life, and still love seeing her go around. Like we figured out what her costume was going to look like, what her, does she wear a hat? Does she not have a hat? What's her hair look like? What's her, does she have a dress? Is it shorts? Like all of those things. And kind of landed on what her look is now, and that was just a super cool thing to have on my notes resume of like achievements, like made a mascot.
That's awesome.
And then through that time, so to make a long story a little bit longer, I had some friends from the church that I went to in Kalamazoo that my buddy invited me to come run tech at. They moved to Grand Rapids, so when I moved back, they were like, hey, we need a tech person if you're available at Berkley. And so I started going back to Calvary, and they just end up paying their audio engineers. I was like, I'm working in baseball, but I'm still a trained, went to grad school for sound design. Like I can mix, like I'm able to do this at a different level than just a volunteer. And they were like, yeah, we kind of have our people, like, thank you, all the same. But at this point we have our staff.
It's a bigger church.
Exactly. Yeah. It's their staff people. That's what they get paid to do, is to make sure that it works throughout the week and then mix on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So I started going to Berkley, and that was just over 10 years ago now.
How'd you get connected to Berkley?
And so that was my friends who were in Kalamazoo. They went to Berkley. They found that church. They were actually living in apartments that were just kind of like right across Knapp from there.
Yep.
And so I started doing, just running sound, just being a volunteer, and then ended up a couple years after that getting the part-time tech director position. And that's definitely morphed and changed as I've been there longer. It started just being in charge of making sure that the sound system and the video system worked. That was my whole responsibility. I didn't care about staff computers, didn't care about the rest of the building. It was just making sure that it worked. And then it's morphed into, being responsible for their emails and being responsible for new staff computers and then the rest of the building. And then, as we've expanded and have, one other location, it was like, okay, what do we got to do to make this location happen? And then now as we're expanding into a second location,
COVID.
And COVID, yeah, that was nuts.
You were the guy.
Super thankful that we ended up getting symmetric fiber like a couple weeks before COVID happened, because any Berkley stream before we were back in the building was coming from my house. So they ended up, the staff would record the videos, send it to me Saturday morning. I'd get a cup of coffee with a whole bunch of creamer. And yep. And
glad I wasn't there.
and then edit the service, and then that would stream Sunday morning from my house. So yeah, all sorts of.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool.
So yeah, that's the quick story. But then my day job as well is director of engineering for an audio video company here in Grand Rapids. So we work with Vizidef. So we work with some global companies, some global corporations, doing. Sometimes it's as simple as a couple of conference rooms, but to showrooms with giant LED walls that are super creative, to completely immersive spaces. So if you stand in this, we're actually hopefully working on one here in the next couple of months, where New York City, where if you stand in the one, like kind of the center spot, your peripheral and everything will be completely surrounded by LED wall, completely put you in the space. And then we also work with a casino here in West Michigan, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, I get to do some cool tech with them too. Like really, really cool opportunities.
That's like one of the biggest projects
Mhm.
was that casino. But you guys have also done stuff with like Amway and
Mhm.
Steelcase and stuff too, right?
Yeah, Steelcase is great.
That's sweet.
They've sent our guys. I mean, we're a small West Michigan company. We're 10 people,
Yeah.
so it's not like we're this nationwide AV company. But what they get with us is consistency. So they send us. I've had guys so far this year. I mean, we're halfway through May, and we've had guys with 3 trips to New York City, 2 trips to San Francisco, 2 trips to Atlanta. We have trips to Chicago coming up, and then we'll probably be in Dallas and all of those cities at least one other time by the end of this year.
Wow.
That's legit. That's really cool.
Yeah,
I'm sure the guys love it.
there's a lot of competition in that industry
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Like you said, people travel and stuff. So a lot of the people that do like LED walls are it's usually the huge companies out of like LA or something. They'll just
Mhm.
go like all over and do it and stuff. So it's cool that you guys are building up a loyal,
Yeah.
customer base and the relationship aspect.
And that's the area. So my job, I end up, we're a small company, so I wear a bunch of hats. So I end up doing, engineering and system design, and drafting is a lot of my job. But then I also end up doing sales, system commissioning, system tuning, programming, LED wall commissioning, and then if we're still short on people, I'll do installs from time to time too. But we end up, Res Life is one of our clients in town. We do stuff with some pretty decent sized churches. But my boss and I, when we're doing sales, our philosophy is about building relationships.
Yeah.
Like in my opinion, there's 2 different schools of thought when you're doing sales in that variety. And it's either product-based sales or it's solution-based sales.
Mm-hmm.
So product-based sales is I have this list of items. I'm going to build you a system that always works with, oh man, I got it. I'm too excited.
I was like, what? I didn't see anything. I was like, what was that?
I'm going to gesture less. So you have this list of equipment, and then you will always come up with a system that comes with that list of equipment. So it's like, yeah, you might be building different systems, from time to time for these different rooms, but it's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss and I are of the philosophy of let's find the best solution for the client, like that hits their budget, that is good quality equipment. And it's honestly the same thing I try to do for churches too.
Mm-hmm.
It's very challenging. And is it time? Am I getting in my soapbox about church technology?
Yeah, let's go there. Let's do it.
Well, it's always changing too. So I think that's in some sense a much more balanced philosophy, because then your ability to adapt as a business isn't based off of the one system you can install. It's more based on your resource for your clients who know like, oh, if we need an update, we can continue going back to the same company, and they're going to be working with the most updated gear, the best things for us.
And like a business is always going to be run by humans. So it's like to having that relational side first and foremost, like that's inherently going to lead you into consistency and keep them coming back to you because you care.
And there have been some other corporate clients that we've met through, other means, where they've just kind of used us as like a one-off. And through that, it's built the relationship. And my whole thing is like, I don't want to be a phone call from the client. I want to be the phone call. I want them, they're like, oh, we need a TV. We need speakers. Like, I'm going to call Keith. That's going to be our guy to do
X, Y, or Z,
whatever the thing is.
You're the easy one. Like you make it easy where they don't have they don't have to shop around for a new person. They're like, oh, they took care of us and we'll just.
And some of that too is getting our pricing right, because we don't want to, we're not going to try to retire on one project. Like I would rather, is a conference room is probably like $6,000, like for TV installed, speaker, video bar, cables to the TV or cables to the table, plug into your computer, plug and play scenario. I'm not going to make a lot of money on a $6,000 conference room.
That's probably cheaper than most companies are charging for a conference room.
But if I do 10 to 15 of those, now we're talking, it's a different story. And that's kind of the realm that I'm trying to get in, is it's not being the cheap and a mass produced, but like, let's be available for whatever the scenario is.
Right. And it, like, you guys know your stuff well, so it's easy to go in and knock that out.
Right.
Because there's no surprises there really.
Right.
Like, so, but yeah, in terms of church stuff with your background in church technology and things like that, and the YouTube videos that we watch and pick apart and this, that, and the other thing, it's an interesting space. And we've talked a lot about this with CCM and music just the modern side of stuff like that, where it becomes more so about the production than
Right.
the heart posture. I don't know if I necessarily have like a question for you, but it's just one of those interesting things to talk about and unpack, especially with someone who's more versed in, that's your responsibility at church,
And I have a direct question to piggyback off of that. It sounds to me like tech was almost a way that God brought you back into the church.
Oh, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I figured out that when I was in early church time, back when I was back in Grand Rapids, that like if I'm going to be going to church, like I either A, like I need to be serving in some capacity, or B, this is a way for me to get back into church. Like 100%. That was exactly what it was. Cole and I have watched a number of videos from people who do church tech tours, which I have some issues with. Not necessarily the people. The people are fine.
Okay.
They have opinion that I can definitely be a very opinionated individual when it comes to this area. And I have some issues with my own industry about a lot of this stuff. Like I work in AV. I make money by selling equipment and training people how to use that equipment in certain scenarios. And I look at mega churches or these churches that are Berkley size or a little bit larger, and they're spending ridiculous amounts of money on soundboards and gear and all this other stuff. And yeah, if you go to Berkley, we have nice stuff. It's not top of the line, but it's nice and it's reliable and it's going to work. Because my philosophy and Greg, our operations pastor, we want to make sure that the environment is something that volunteers want to volunteer in. Like if you're band-aiding and literally taping together cables, like your volunteers are eventually just gonna be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm just gonna sit there and not have to deal with this on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But when we post-COVID, we put the video control room, or as I lovingly call it, the VCR,
Mm-hmm.
Together at Berkley, down in the basement. That was a $20,000 room. But that was TVs, sound equipment. That was some, video switcher. Computers.
Sounds like a lot of money to some people, but that's
right.
Pretty
marginal.
You can spend that on one piece of gear in
Right.
that room. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so for us, it was finding stuff that worked well, that did the job, is going to be reliable, but is not going to break the bank. And that's where a lot of my personal issues come in that I'm dealing with, of like, you'll have people who go, oh yeah, man, you got to have that. Like if you're a church, man, you got to be a Yamaha CL series easy. Like anything less than that, like the Lord is not flowing through your soundboard. And
Digico all the way.
exactly. Or like, PM10 Rivage or whatever it is. And I end up with a lot of these churches. My philosophy is like, yeah, you could spend $15,000 on a soundboard. That's going to sound really good. But what if we spent $3,000 on the soundboard, and then with the rest of that 15 grand bolstered some other areas of your tech ministry that need help? Or let's maybe only spend 10 grand, and then let's use that other $5,000 that was budgeted for another ministry or for some other outreach or for something else that's going to end up like reaching people that is not just this one soundboard.
Mm-hmm.
And for 95% of the congregation, they're not going to be able to tell the difference.
I promise you that if we were to do an X32 versus a PM, like that's my go-to like extreme ridiculous board, because it's like $150,000 console. But if we played the same track on the same system, everything flat on the console, like we could not tell the difference between them. And that's my thing. Is I jokingly put that in on the Live Sound Reddit a couple months ago. Somebody was like, oh man, how about this board? How does this sound? And I just put this little nugget, and I was like, well, chances are anybody in your audience, congregation, whatever it is not going to be able to tell the difference. And then I went ... And probably most people on this thread would also fail that test. And it just went off. And I was like, where's my popcorn? Like, I just want to watch this. But it's true. Like if you think about, we as audio video tech nerd people, we stress over how something is going to sound. And yeah, if an SM7B versus a Sennheiser 421 is going to sound different, but depending on what we're putting it on, it's not going to make a difference. Like the average person is still going to be able to hear and understand the vocals or the voice or whatever it might be.
Your source is typically different too. So
yeah,
it's actually like a psychology thing where my voice will always sound different than your voice, even if we're on the same mic, the same settings.
Right.
So if you are hearing a little bit of an EQ shift, it doesn't wig out people's ears or brain.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think there's, all of this with like nuance, because I think people with extremely trained ears can pick stuff apart. But
Right.
again, like that isn't the majority of people, especially on a Sunday. Like,
Right.
it's not really the spot that's going to appear. you
Yeah.
know?
Well, it's like I think that this is all within the bounds of like budget gear has gotten so good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's worth saying, because like 10 years ago,
Oh, dude.
like this is a different conversation, because the difference between pro gear, like basically the only option to get this functionality was spending 150 grand or whatever on a board, like to do what you can do now with a $3,000 piece of gear.
The sound system that I owned when I was in college, running, in bars, jazz clubs, all that kind of stuff, was a couple of Mackies on a stick. Actually, the ones I still have, I still DJ with.
Nice,
They're still, kudos to you, Mackie. The SRM 450 V2s, still like 10 years later, they're fine. They're a little beat up, but they work. I had a Yamaha 12 channel console and, a box of 58s and, a cheap Proco snake. And that was it. But it was, at the time that was like $5-6 grand worth of stuff. And now with that same amount of money, the amount of stuff that you can do, like digital consoles, an XR18, everything that board, even the 12, what that can do with an iPad is bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
It's an audio interface. You can record at the same time.
Right.
Like the amount of things that you can do with that as well. Technology has just gone crazy, crazy advanced in that short amount of time.
Yeah.
Even like the wing, like how much is that board? Like $3 grand?
$4,500.
Yeah. Like the wing is pretty nuts.
Yeah. So I think that like the way I see it is technology, and it's the same thing with like an iPhone, right? Versus like how much you had to spend to get a fraction of the functionality that it has. We're like blessed to be in a place where this conversation's even possible. Like in terms of being able to do all of those things that you can do on a budget.
Now we can shoot 8K RAW from our iPhones.
ProRes at least.
Yeah, exactly. Like
kind of dumb.
Totally bonkers.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same thing with like film too. Like the fact that even these cameras are accessible to us now, like that's kind of ridiculous. I also equate it to like talking about the budget for like the VCR. It's kind of like and especially for the volunteers, it's like for someone who's like just learning guitar, like buy a decent guitar. Like don't buy a cheap one that you're going to hate to learn on, because then you're not going to like it and you're going to put it down and not want to enjoy it.
I think your philosophy on pedals and all that stuff is like spot on.
That's his philosophy.
All right, Nate, I think your philosophy on pedals that I've heard through Cole, but like you max out what you can do with the pedals and then you
use what you have, because then it's like, then what that extra piece is going to do better than if you just like continue to consume.
And at this point, trying to max out the gear that we have at Berkley. And part of it also comes down to, one of the things that I'm definitely specific on when it comes to the stage presentation, it's not necessarily being production forward, but it's eliminating distraction. Because for some people, I'm meticulous about how cables look on stage. That was one of the things that
or music stands or whatever.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Because for some people, that's distracting. Like if you look at a stage and you see cables all over the place, you might not even be a tech person, but you could be OCD.
Or just subconsciously like turned off by it and not know why.
And so for me, like when I go and do a church training, and so I'm like, all right, cool. What time do you guys start run through? And like, oh, well, we don't really do a run through. And I'm like, cool. Let's start doing a run through, because the smoother your transition is, it's not about like, oh yeah, this church is really polished. It's like, well, what if somebody was totally connected to God through that moment of worship, and then now we're transitioning into prayer, and then all of a sudden you have crazy feedback. Like you're out of that moment. Like it's not there. And it's not trying to manufacture artificially moments with God, but I'm trying to just create the environment.
Our part.
I'm trying to create the environment so that way God can speak through it. I'm not going to create those moments.
Right.
Remove resistance. And like people are so used to production value nowadays too, that to ignore that, people come in with a standard because they are like, the production value that they're used to on an iPhone with audio and the way you can edit video and stuff like that nowadays is just insane. But, I think you like, this isn't all to say to manufacture a, like, the Holy Spirit or a moment like that through fogs and lights and
manipulation.
And good audio.
Production manipulation.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that doesn't have its place.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's when every church tries to get there
or think they need it.
Right.
Well, it's not in a, absolutely. I think that's the point. It's like, it's not wrong for some churches that have surplus budget that are serving a specific, group of people and doing what they're supposed to do. Like I think that's one thing, but like you were saying, like for some churches to go into debt and to, like, really like push their budget just to get certain pieces of gear, it's probably not stewarding,
Right.
resources well.
And there might be a time where to go back to the pedal board of, the reason we have a wing at Berkley is because I maxed out channels on the X32.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason that we upgraded that board. And once it also was a necessity when we did the VCR, because I was like, all right, I got to get audio downstairs.
Yeah.
The Dante card's not available. What am I going to do to do this? Okay, I need 3 outputs, and then, design the system around that need. But it was the need that drove the gear, not the gear that drove the need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. We're in such a gearhead culture that, like, amateur guitarists, and this is again where we kind of, come from in that space. It's like, oh, I need to get this crazy amp and these guitars, and then I'll sound like John Mayer. It's like, no, you won't. Like, and this is I remember. And
first off, do you want to sound like John Mayer? Like, is that really
well, most people do. Yeah,
his play style, maybe not his personality. But yeah.
The first time that you came up and talked to me about pedals, this was the conversation we had. Like, you were just asking me about the gear, and I'm definitely like, I don't know. I have certain things that are important that I think you shouldn't compromise on that do get you there. And, obviously experience comes in when you know what's worth investing in and what isn't.
And a lot of that is like fundamentals too.
Yeah. But I was like, dude, he was asking me about what pedals I had on in different songs and stuff. And I was like, dude, I had the same 3 pedals on the entire time.
Yeah.
And I just was playing my guitar.
I was like, oh, what a letdown.
And I had like 10 pedals on my board or something at the time. But I was like, I had my compressor on, I had my reverb on, and I didn't even use a drive. I think I had my delay pedal that I turned on and off.
Your board really hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the full drive, which I have.
Yeah. So I was like, I mean, it's probably safe to say 90% of what your sound is going to be you knowing how to use what you have.
Yeah.
Right.
And more so in that specific scenario, like your fingers actually playing the guitar and
tone
not playing
knobs,
the pedals.
like the bass, actually, like you said, fundamentals. So like a $3,000 soundboard has an EQ. Nowadays it has an EQ. It has a high pass filter.
Well, there's compression on every single channel.
We have a crap ton of like FX and inboard reverb and delay.
You don't
and
even need compression to get 90% of the way there on a mix. You in live setting, it's like volume and EQ, and then the compression just makes the depth sit where you need it to. Like, people get too crazy in their minds about like certain ratios and stuff. And it's like,
it's at least with church volunteers, my philosophy is you're an amateur until proven professional. Like, I will, if there's a trained vocalist, they know how to work that mic and get that dynamic range and use it artistically or whatever it is. But if you're an untrained vocalist, mic technique for you is still a foreign concept. So the last thing I want to do is have a volunteer vocalist and then a volunteer audio person trying to chase that volunteer vocalist all over the place. But if I can compress them pretty heavily, so that way their dynamics are pretty, dang it, I did it again. So if I can compress their dynamics so that way their volume is pretty consistent, now it becomes a little bit more artistic for the mixer. Yeah. There's a ton of stuff that I end up doing with the soundboard, with the video, with all of that stuff that's super general, that if I were mixing the show every single week, the board would end up looking very different. But I have to think about a number of,
jumping on and being able to use it.
Yeah. I'm super fortunate. I have like 20 some volunteers across all 3 disciplines at Berkley. I'm incredibly thankful for the team that I have. But I tell them all you need to have is some enthusiasm, and I can train the rest.
Right. And that's, I think, the big difference that, again, we're kind of almost within this conversation, we're kind of pitting like the on-staff front of house guy that is there every single Sunday that gets paid and knows the heck out of his board. And at that point, it is probably like a nicer board and he can do fancier things versus corralling 20 different people that have all different levels of experience. And now we have to even that out somehow and make a Sunday happen, essentially. Like that's a different ball game, you know, than a staff person coming in and knowing what they're doing.
Exactly right.
Pulling up a preset or something. Yeah.
Yeah. The more that I can do to, you know, people with all sorts of different, you know, Cole will come and mix for me. You know, he's on my schedule when he's not, when I have
doing that next week.
Yeah. Right. For outdoor service too,
service.
making it way more tricky for you.
Yeah.
When I pry him off of the worship team as a guitarist anyway.
You get your requests in on planning center early.
Right. I have to box out the worship assistant. But so we go from experience levels like myself or Cole down to somebody who is, you know, I'm training somebody right now who has never done audio outside of like setting up a microphone for their Twitch stream. Like that's all he's done. And so I'm teaching them the basics of, okay, here's what a dynamic microphone does. Here's an XLR cable. Here is a balanced line. Like what is the difference between a balanced line and an unbalanced line? Like from total ground zero. So I have to try to balance out the usability of these systems for those different experience levels. And, you know, like I tell the team, like, if you have ideas or whatever it is, tell me. I'd love to hear them, but understand that this is a benevolent dictatorship. Like I am thinking of the forest and not for the trees. So whatever change we have to do doesn't just affect the tech team. There's also other people, you know, worship leaders, you know, groups that come and use these spaces. Like I got to make sure it works for them too. So I'm not going to just make a change for the sake of making a change or because it's going to be easier for us on Sunday. Like I have to think about the whole process.
It's different than like a set and forget or having total control because it's the same people like every week. Yeah.
Well, and even just the type of board that you get, because you could get a $150,000 board, but you know, when you have more control over the sound, you can get a better result, but you can also make it sound worse.
Oh yeah.
So that's another thing that like a lot of people are like, oh, I just want more, you know, like thinking of like a narrow EQ band and then overusing it versus like a nice gentle broadband EQ. Like it's much easier to EQ the life out of something, or, you know, get yourself in the weeds on like tone or anything. And it versus like stuff that's dummy proof per se. And it's like you get going and the user interface is friendly and it's easy to use and it's got low, mid, and high. And like, that's a very easy concept to understand. And, so like to get going with volunteers, like that's a whole nother ball game. It's even like that with DAWs and plugins.
Oh yeah.
Where like, you know, there's some plugins that are so advanced that if you need that, like people always think like, oh, I need to be using the plugins the pros are using. It's like, until you can tell a difference between them, you shouldn't be, right? Like until you know you need a new guitar or a new pedal, don't get one. And like you'll feel the time where you're realizing that your skills are surpassing your equipment or that your need is surpassing your equipment.
Right.
And that's the time to upgrade.
I had the pleasure of when one of my professors had a medical thing happen, of stepping in at Western as a supervisor for a couple of productions in the theater department. And the senior that I was supervising through his production of The Wiz, my thing to him the whole time was like, dude, let's keep it simple. Your pit orchestra is in a totally different room. You're mixing a group that is not physically in the same space that you're in right now. And I'm like, you're doing all of these complications. Like, let's try to keep it. It's also in the round, by the way. So, so not only is your pit in a completely different space, you're also in a 360 environment with omnidirectional microphones. Like, for those listening or watching who don't know, it just picks up in all directions. It's not a good, this is the worst case scenario for a young mixing engineer.
Tough.
And I was like, all right. And when we do our system EQ, we're only going to use 3 bands. Like, let's just try to keep this as simple as possible, because if we start to get into the technical things, we're starting to talk about phase alignment and all these other things. Like let's keep things as simple as possible, because when you need to troubleshoot, like the simpler the system for you, the easier things are going to be. And that's volunteers. And I mean, I deal that when in the corporate world too. Like I have to design
conference rooms.
Yeah. Design the system. What's this touchscreen going to look like that the average person who's just, bringing their laptop in, they need to be able to turn the TV on, turn the volume up, and know where the camera's facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's translating a lot of the technical knowledge that we just inherently have and not dumbing it down, but finding that lowest common denominator.
Well, and I think maybe transitioning a little bit is kind of that, like, we can think about all of this stuff, and it's always so humbling. Like every time I hear like Kyle pray about it, like Sunday morning, where it's like we can do all of this stuff, and at the end of the day, like God has to show up and like move in the realm of like church tech on a Sunday morning. My head's still there, but like, yeah, it's like we can do all of this stuff, and I think God welcomes that. Like I think about the tabernacle in the Old Testament, where it was like fine, things, lampstands out of gold, and like there was like nice things there, and
beautiful architecture,
exactly,
detail,
and if
artistry.
I went to a different church here a couple weeks ago, and it was massive production, like leaps ahead of where Berkley's at, and it was like, oh my gosh, like that's really cool. And through this conversation, like I can easily get in my head about, well, like again, like do they have the budget for this? Is this really showy? And it comes back to analyzing their heart posture, from like a top-down perspective, and how easy it is for someone to just walk into a church that they've never been to before and just make snap judgments about everything.
Right.
But yeah, it's so humbling to just be like, we care so much about all of this stuff and we want to steward it so well. But then at the end of the day, it's like God has to show up and move and you touch people.
You still have to have some of that curb appeal too. Like there's a little bit of that, like the Holy Spirit's going to move how the Holy Spirit's going to move, but like we also have to meet it and do the work to show that like we're ready for you to come into this space.
Well, and that was so fortunate, like with the LED wall. Like that's exactly what the LED
I was going to bring that up?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was going to bring it up if you weren't going to bring it up because I'll let you.
So from work, we had taken down an LED wall from a financial institution in Chicago, and it was sitting in our shop just gathering dust. And it was, 10 years old at the time. It was probably $150,000, $200,000 LED wall. But we used a piece of it for our confidence display because I was really scared of replacing the projector lamp because I had to stand on not a step of a 16-foot ladder and reach above my head to get this projector down to replace the lamp. So if I don't have to do that, I'm going to find any other thing I could possibly do.
Yeah.
But then we also had a couple of panels after we switched out that confidence display and then put them on the back wall instead of our projectors on the side. And then that's now our main display at Berkley is this LED wall, which outside of a processor and putting in some circuits was completely free to Berkley. But it's a cool thing. I think it's added a cool aspect to Berkley. Yeah, the slides are pretty much the exact same. The videos are pretty much the exact same.
I was gonna say like we haven't even pushed it yet. Like it's just bare, but we're basically using it as a projector, but it can do a lot more, and we can have some fun with it.
Right. But to somebody who's coming in, they're like, "Oh, that's cool. All right, I'm going to like either let down some of those guards that I potentially have coming into this space." Or I'm just going to like think this is cool and then let the Holy Spirit keep me distracted.
Yes, yeah. That's another thought that I just had, and we've talked about this before, but it's kind of that idea where people that are like church hopping based on production value of like, oh, this church has like these crazy LED walls and their mix sounds massive and awesome, and like I'm gonna go there because of that, or like whatever. And it's like, or even being at a church for a while and then seeing another church that has a much higher production value and then want to swing over there because of the production value itself instead of staying connected like in the roots in your community. But yeah, like that, I think that's huge. And how cool is it that we can kind of keep up that curb appeal?
You did it too. Nice. I'm not alone.
Keep up that curb appeal at Berkley to be able to do that. Like, I think that's sweet,
Well, and I at one point had interviewed before I got the job I have now. I had interviewed with Mars Hill and Ada Bible, and was in the final interview stages with both of those churches. And I remember telling them in the interview, I was like, I don't want to leave Berkley. I feel like that's like, it's a great place. I feel like the Spirit's working in there through whatever's going on. I'm not saying that any of, church you go to or anybody else who's listening or watching, it's not like your church is not the place, but at least for me, that was where I felt a lot of connection, a lot of growth. But I told him, I was like, if this is where you're pulling me right now, God, then I want to be a good servant to that and go. And I didn't end up getting those jobs for various reasons. But both of those churches are much higher in production value. And for some people, that is the only thing that they go for. And I'm definitely a person who, I feel a closer connection to God through the music, through like good music. If it's not mixed well or other stuff, then I start to feel distracted, like those things that we're, trying to eliminate those distractions.
I do too.
Yeah.
It's tough to like turn that off.
Well, I think it is worth being said that like, obviously technology isn't the be all end all, but it's not a small population of people that work in technology nowadays
Oh,
where
for sure.
those things, like whether they have good intentions or not, do distract. And, in the short term, if you're visiting, if you're only there for a bit, you can kind of shrug them off. But if you're looking at some place to like be and invest, that is something that would be overall affect your ability to forget about that stuff, right? Like it's like when you feel like your worship pastor is always going to play a wrong chord while you're doing worship, then like you're probably not going to be able to like really
soak and sit.
Yeah, exactly. So excellence isn't a negative. That's not what we're saying at all. Excellence is a positive, but making that the object of our worship
Right.
is the issue. It's idolatry, right? Like making the
striving
point
for that
excellence versus making the point God and giving our gifts that He's given us, the minds that He's given us, our talents and time and passions back to Him as a gift in excellence is actually the best way that we can steward what He's given us, right? Versus like thinking about like, oh, I care about technology ever but when I go to church. It's like, why don't you care about it at church? Because don't you want to bring your best to God? Don't you want to like, if you have a gift, don't you want to use it like in like for like His church, like more than you would like your job that you're getting dollars for?
And that's like that was my heart with like the Big Serve like video and stuff. Like that's in using my gifts and the gear and the resources that I have to like pour back into Berkley. Like that's really refreshing. And it's like if we had the budget, like I'd be all over like the camera system like at Berkley. Like we've talked and it's getting nice cameras to like do that or run a wireless like on like stuff like that where it's like I want to do that, but it's not because I want to just make Berkley this massive thing and like release these killer videos. It's like, no, I want to do that for God, just because it's like I don't need to get paid for that, but I love doing that and I want to use my gifts in that way to like glorify God on a Sunday. Like, well, and that's fun.
And I've had that struggle as well, like as somebody who it is my profession. But then on top of that, I'm also, a part-time person on staff at a church doing what my profession is. And I don't make as much at the church as I do in my full-time job. But then on a Sunday, every 2 weeks I put my hours in, but Sunday I like have my time. There's part of my time on a Sunday that is my job. Like that's the reason I am there. But then there is the other part of my time that is either my volunteer time or it is me in the service, like taking notes and being part of the worship and listening to the message. And I'm like, it certainly should not be like, I should be paying back for that. Like that's not something that I should be receiving funds for. And so it's finding that line of, I had a couple of people who were serving at Berkley who, one of them was a sound tech at Cornerstone. Like he was a teacher. He ran the chapel, but was just a volunteer. That was him serving at Berkley, was doing what his job was, but doing it for free for the church, for, serving to give his gifts back to God through that, through that act.
Right. Yeah. It's a interesting line to walk, isn't it? Like, and one that you kind of always have to be aware of and check yourself on.
Yeah. I think God welcomes that too.
Yeah.
It's like we want to, and that's what I said earlier is kind of like it comes back to the heart posture of like, why are we doing this?
Right.
Like, can our church afford to run all of our cameras as red Komodos? No. Like there's some churches that can, and if they do it with a heart posture that is all glory to God, then it, I think it can be done really, really well. And how sweet would that be? Again, like bringing excellence, but to, this is just circling back, but to want to get there right out of the gate and be like, oh, we need this. It's missing the mark.
I think about impact and like reach, and I think honestly the same way within minimal. It's a less holy thought, but but the idea that like these videos are reaching people, like okay, how many people are watching Berkley's live stream every week? Like
between the two services, we're about 60 to 80 streams up and down.
And then how many people are attending in person?
400 to 500.
Mm-hmm.
So even just a percentage based of like how many people are actually being served by a camera upgrade
Right.
is the question, right? Like whereas you look at like a bigger church where they're some like they might be a mega church, they might have a lot of people, but their videos are reaching 50 times the people that are in their church. They might need to upgrade their cameras because God uses their videos to pull people out of darkness that aren't even in the church walls, and there's a whole ministry there in and of itself, and that church needs to lean into the identity and the mission God's given them and the platform that he's put them in. So it's not I think it's important to say that it's not to knock anyone who's doing that. It's just like to be honest to what God is calling your church, your identity as a church, what is on the heart of the people of the church, the leadership, what the Spirit's doing with that specific church. Not every church serves the same population in the same way, and that's like part of being the body of Christ, right?
Well, it makes me think about during, as COVID was air quotes winding down, we had a woman come in and be baptized, and her only interaction with Berkley, she lived in the 49505 zip code, was just a couple of streets over from where Berkley was. And her only interaction was through the online service.
Wow.
And then she came in and got baptized at the church. And like, I start to get choked up, like just thinking about it, because there's also the point of like, where is the, if I were to look at it from a business standpoint, where's the return on investment? But I'm like, if that one person,
it's one,
that one lady came in and got baptized for it. And like, that's the thing that I need to sometimes remind even the volunteers, like, yeah, you're down in the basement. It's a dark room. You don't, you see numbers on the stream, but you don't,
people.
You don't exactly. And, usually I count like, okay, it's 40 people. Yeah. It probably averages out that there's actually 80 people watching online right now. But if one person from that group of 40,
that's a lot of people. I was expecting to be a little lower, to be honest. Like I feel like that's a good amount of watches.
And yeah, how many of those people are only, stuck in bed, sick at home, whatever it is, they can't come to church.
Right.
And then that's their one experience. And then they come and get, baptized or a salvation or something like that from it. Like, that's the thing that I have to sometimes remind the tech team of, like, this is why we're doing
it's important.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to say that to say like it's a A plus B equals C, and in terms of to make people a number. I'm totally on board with that. But if you're like, if you have cameras and you are able to stream and you're able to get it out there and do it with as good as you can with the gear you have, but like all of a sudden Berkley, has 100,000 people on their stream and they've got 500 people in the congregation, then probably the focus of the leadership should be, how can we serve the 100,000 people that are watching? Not to ignore the people there, but shift a little bit of those
now
resources.
Just our live studio audience.
clap track. Oh my gosh. Side note, really bugs me when there's fake clapping in like modern worship songs. It's like one of my biggest pet peeves.
Like in time, or just like people celebrating, like
the intro and outro.
Like it's alive.
Gosh,
sounds like Guitar Hero. Like like when you're done with a song in Guitar Hero and the crowd's just like, they're like clapping and there's just like crowd noise. Like, and maybe I don't mean to ruin this for anyone who listens to modern worship music. There's so many good things about that and I work in it, but it's like it typically happens when like you're getting you're getting a smaller church to release like an album, which is fine. I mean, that's great, but I don't know. It just bugs me that there needs to be clapping on the outro for it to like feel like the Lord did something in that song. But that's a side note. It's like a laugh track, like once you realize it's there, it's just like you can't unhear that it's a laugh track.
Yep. Yep.
Is this when I'm supposed to laugh? This is the
Yeah.
spot? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just want to make
Thank
sure
you
that we're
for
on the same
telling
page.
me.
Pressing the
I
button.
appreciate it.
And yeah, whatever. I mean, it's production. I get it. But like like I said, it just reminds me of Guitar Hero. I'm like,
That's funny.
that's a
That's
total
funny.
side note, but that's awesome. I haven't been running sound a lot, like live lately.
Mhm.
It's been a while.
I don't remember the last time I ran sound at Berkley. It's probably been a couple months.
Yeah, they kind of took you from me on the
Well,
like, oh, we need a guitar player.
it was Easter.
Yeah, that's true.
Easter happened, and then I've never done live sound outside to
Mhm.
this extent before.
Yeah,
Like we're doing next week,
it'll be a thing.
which will be. Hopefully, we don't get
It's-
any neighbor complaints this year.
It's just one day a year.
Yeah.
It's
Which is
I mean, I
why
took
we're
the
doing
dB
one day.
meter to the property line, and we were less than 70 dB at the property line.
So they can't really do anything about that.
Exactly, but we'll still get the complaints.
For sure.
That's fine. The outdoor
tough.
service, like,
behind me, Satan.
put your dB meter away. The outdoor service has its place. Like, I get, it gets everybody together. It's we're combining everybody from Frost Creek, from Berkley, and then now people from Nap will be
That'd be
joining. And so that's cool, but it's the dog and pony show of like, we're outside. Like, we have this beautiful building with air conditioning, but hey, let's all go sweat for an hour and a half and
Hopefully the weather's not
Lug
too
a bunch
bad.
of gear out there.
exactly and set it up.
Spend 4
and-
times longer setting it up.
Yeah. That's why I texted the team yesterday. I was like, give me your
Mhm.
coffee order.
Yeah.
We're going to be well caffeinated. We're going to be,
Jittery
fueled
as
up.
all get out.
Yep. it's going to take us 5 minutes to plug an XLR in because we're going to be shaking so much.
Can't
But-
wait
Well,
to-
it means you're doing your job if everybody else likes it.
yeah, I know.
You're bearing the burden.
Yeah.
That is my cross to bear, unfortunately. Except it's just made out of Pelican cases and cables.
Buy your tickets now.
That's
right. Limited entry.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all access.
We have merch.
I mean, a couple of years ago, it was 2021. COVID was still going on, and we were trying to figure out what to do for the summer. And so we invested in some gear. We built some tables. We have that shipping container out there. Wired it for did low voltage, did high
that was
voltage.
like the main purpose of the shipping container.
Yeah,
right?
was the
that.
backdrop
yeah.
for the outdoor services. And so that way we would bring the tables out. Everything was on the tables. I screwed everything down. I have a very weird quirk about me that Cole can attest to, that I
Oh no.
hate bringing stuff outside for services, or like my toolbox for work. I have 2 toolboxes that I mainly use. One of them is my like installation, doing rack work, that kind of stuff. It has all the tools, the voltmeters, the everything I need for that kind of job. But then I have basically the exact same pouch of tools between that and then my testing, programming, troubleshooting toolbox, because I hate moving stuff from one to the other. I just want to grab the box and go. And so like for that outdoor service, it was like looms of cable, like everything that we had for outdoors, I bought just for the outdoor service. So that way everything inside, if it rained, we could just go back inside. We didn't have to like move gear around. And so I am
Like 2 sets of stuff.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is great because it provides us a backup of everything. So if something dies, I know I have a working whatever it is, but it is a total quirk of mine that I hate moving, like my desk at work and my desk at home. I can drop a laptop in with one cable and plug it all in. I have 2 of everything because I'm
the same way.
weirdly neurotic about that.
Yeah. I'm
And-
the same way.
I think it makes sense. Over time, if you especially in this type of work, that's a huge distraction. Like,
Oh yeah.
when I was dating my wife, I jokingly said that like 90% of being a musician is setting up and tearing down. I mean, it's probably 95%. And I was like, it's kind of true. But like if you have, even within like recording and like, music in the studio, if you have to like move mics all the time, it's just it takes a lot of time and energy, and like you feel zapped at the end of the day
Mhm.
versus like flow state happens when you're like, what instrument would sound cool on this? You're like, oh, guitar? Sweet, I've got the mic set up. Let me just grab this guitar, sit down, and like in 5 minutes we're rocking and rolling. Versus like, I don't know, you can get really in the weeds about like what miking technique and what mic, and like that's good too. But having at least something set up that you can get something down is like a huge creative like
It pulls you out of the moment when you have
Yeah.
to set up stuff like that.
yeah. So like, I mean, it definitely makes a difference. Like I think people don't realize the burden until they experience what it's like to just sit down and then get going. You know what I mean? And if you can swing it, if your gear is cheap enough to have 2 sets,
Right.
That's the thing. It's like whenever I like to have my pedal board always set up under my desk, and then I always love to have my amp plugged in at home, but I can't have 2 sets. Like if I'm playing at Sunday, it's like I have to bring all of that. But then when I get home, I immediately set it all back up, and my guitar hangs on the wall. So it's like just pull it off. I can plug in and plug this in, turn my amp on, and I'm like ready to go. You know, so I live for that.
Yeah, that's kind of the dream for me right now. Like we have a little 2-bedroom house in Fulton Heights, and we're renting, and my like office and like my room is in the 2nd bedroom, and it's a pretty small, tight room, and I've got it like set up nice and it sounds good, but you know, I can't have stuff just like mics set up and like guitars, and I don't have drums at home anymore. They're all here.
You can really only track like vocals and guitar in there.
And like percussion.
Is it also like a guest room?
No.
Okay.
It's just strictly my
Because I
office,
figured there
which
would be
is
like a
good.
bed in there too, which might be good for like deadening some sound too.
Yeah.
Like, I got this twin but then I'd feel bad if you had a guest over and they're like, I need to get water in the middle of the night, and it's just like stepping on pedals.
I have a lot of like sound treatment in there. So, and I have like my desk in the middle of the room, so it's not up against the wall. So I've kind of taken over the room. But yeah, one thing that I dream about is a studio that's in like an outbuilding, and the ability to have a drum set mic'd all the time, and like, because I don't play as much as I do.
Much more, dude.
I just walk in.
It's only my dream.
Yeah, I like walk in the door, and I would sit down and like play for 5 minutes, and then get going to work and stuff, and like, you know, when all your drums are stacked up on a rack, like you don't play unless you're on an album, which is where I'm at now, where it's like I'm not playing as much unless I have a need to, versus being able to walk in and like having all of those things just out. And then
that's even more time to set up than a guitar, because
drums
takes way longer to set up.
Dude, as a sound person, I have a kindred spirit with drummers. Like, because the amount of gear that they have to bring in, it's that was
tough.
It's nice because I can leave it all here and it's like set up, and for the most part the drums are basically like set up. I typically will move like my rooms and overheads, but you know, we've got our kind of like miking set up good all the time here. Just got to patch it and figure out what gear I want to use. But yeah, I even here, like I'm a guest here. I'm technically like a staff engineer, so I'm a frequent flyer, but it's not my own space where I can just like do it how I want and leave it set up all the time and patched into the stuff I want with like my EQs generally where I know they need to be. It's like ground floor every time. So that's like my goal, because I think there it is.
Sugar.
I think I would be much more productive and like just be able to lose myself in the creation of the music at that point.
I'm so surprised that has never happened before now.
What?
Your lid.
I know. I do that all the time.
Lid all the time up there, and
that was my question.
It's never even dawned on me that you would knock it off, and I'm very surprised that was the first time that has happened.
It's because I was it's because it was close, and then I was aware of it.
We've all hit stuff this
What's
episode.
going on? What's going on?
This is actually, we're doing our own version of Stomp. It's all just going to be banging on. So I'm expecting a really sweet mix from you, where you just like, these are not going to be just sampled and looped.
Can I smash the Chemex?
You should do an edit. You should do an edit where it's like a beat and it's like the sounds. Like, that'd be so funny.
We'll do it. We'll do it.
That's so good.
Well,
yeah.
I'm done. Did you drink that whole thing?
I did, with no creamer, because I love you.
Oh
Cole.
my goodness.
Did it get better as it cooled, or not really for you?
The temperature changed. That was.
I would hope so.
I think I got a grain in there.
Tough. That was great. I thoroughly enjoyed that coffee.
I'm glad that it's recorded that was the first cup of black coffee I've ever had start to finish. So ever.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yep.
We did it.
That's a W.
Can we clip that?
Yep. To the YouTubes.
Well, that's how good Quickwater coffee is, everybody.
Yeah. Gotta put that on the line.
Come on.
Absolutely.
What have you been listening to lately?
So I do a lot of podcasts. I have a series of nerdy podcasts that I listen to on Mondays. Berkley does a fast. So my wife will do social media. And then I because I like when I'm at work, when I'm in the car, I listen to podcasts pretty much all the time.
You're a fiend.
I'm a fiend.
He listens to our show. Don't worry, guys.
I absolutely do. Yeah.
On
Overcast
Yeah.
is my go-to app of choice.
So that 5% on Spotify on podcasters, that's just him.
Just Overcast is strictly me. It's a cool app. Check it out. It's the way that I like to listen to podcasts anyway.
From a connoisseur.
Yeah. But Mondays I fast from listening to podcasts, so I'll tend to do music. And so I will intentionally replace that listening with worship music or something else. And then typically towards the end of the day, I will get just kind of a little antsy towards like worship music all day. Like I'm at a point where I'm like, okay.
The
like,
sound, the textures.
yeah,
similar.
it's very similar. And so
yeah, especially if it's all anthem worship
Right.
music.
And so at that point, I'm like, all right, I need something else. And my go-to album has been Need to Breathe live from Bridgestone Arena, which we saw that tour with some friends. Also, Switchfoot opened for them.
Oh, sorry.
And that is one of the best live recordings I've ever heard. It is my go-to driving in the car, like want to just rock out, put on this album. I know it is like live applause. It is not canned applause, which makes it a little bit better.
Yes.
But yeah, that would be a good one. And I gotta, I still listen to Megan's album from time to time.
Yeah.
I'm so stoked to be able to, if things work out, be able to mix her headlining show and be able to mix for you guys.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I will say we can promote that because when this comes out in 2 weeks, we'll probably have posters up. So Megan's doing a show August 31st, I think is our date.
Yep.
Park Theater in Holland. Follow us on social and we'll post about it.
Yeah, that was how I
some
found out that
stories
Cole
and
had a
stuff.
band, which I was like, you've been one of my best friends for how long now? And just found out you had a band.
'Cause
Thanks,
we
you
haven't
jerk.
done anything in like
Wow.
3 years.
We dropped a song and then COVID hit and then Josh moved to Texas and
Yeah.
Gosh,
so
so
we're,
selfish.
we're sitting on like 8 songs.
And they're so good. So the show Circle East is opening and then it's Megan's show. Megan's headlining. So
Yeah.
check it out.
Thursday night.
I'll drop a link to Park Theater's website so you can buy tickets in the show notes of this on YouTube and Spotify, Apple Music.
So yeah, still do quite a bit of that. But yeah, I'm stoked to mix for you guys. That's
Thank
gonna
you.
be.
I'm excited.
I have one record. It is Daft Punk's Random Access Memories 10th anniversary edition. Album came out in 2013. This year is the 10th anniversary, and they just released a bunch of like B-sides to the recording. It's on Spotify. I haven't listened to it yet because I ordered the vinyl and it's coming tomorrow. It's a 3-disc vinyl, 6 sides, and
That's a lot of work.
Stoked.
Got a
I'm
lot of
pumped.
flipping to do.
Well, I've already listened. 2 of the discs are just the album,
Sure.
Random Access Memories, and then side 5 and 6 on the 3rd disc is all the new stuff. So I'll probably just like jump right into that. But
Nice.
been listening to that lately, and I'm pumped for that. That's gonna come.
I do
in the
love their
mail
Tron
tomorrow.
soundtrack.
It's one of my favorites.
That's so good.
It's one of my favorite movies because of that.
Yeah,
And they also cameo in that movie.
they do. They're the MP3 player.
Kinda, yeah.
They're a program. They're playing the. All right. Anyway,
I get it.
That's
I get it. That's awesome.
a nerd cut.
It's an old movie, isn't it?
Legacy came out in 20. It was
2008.
Been a while.
Oh, really?
I
I thought it was a little after
2009.
that. Yeah.
I was at Western. I remember because I watched it with a friend of mine, and we watched the original Tron movie. And then
Mhm.
watch Tron Legacy. Like we went to the theater and watched Tron Legacy.
Cool.
And there's so many little nuanced things that are in, like they call back to the
Oh,
original.
That's cool.
I don't
when-
think I've seen the original. I
Oh,
should
for real?
watch it, yeah.
Just for historical sake.
Yeah, I need
and
to.
then bonus points if anyone can point out where the hidden Mickey is
Really?
in the original Tron movie. It
Interesting.
is not the Mickey head that we know of, like the 3 circles. It is actually like a profile shot of Mickey, but it is in the movie. It is, you can freeze frame it and
No
find
way.
it.
That's cool.
So that's your
Wow.
deep cut.
Nice.
But yeah, like little things like when Sam goes into the building
Yeah.
in the new one, he's like, wow, that's a big door. Like Flynn says the same thing
Oh.
in the original.
Gotcha.
So that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, this
That's
is
cool.
amazing. And I was the only one in the theater who thought it was cool.
Well, I listened to like Derezed and that soundtrack
Mhm.
on a repeat after that movie came out. And the bar scene is so cool because Daft Punk's behind like the glass and they're DJing the club and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, they got their white helmets on.
Yep.
Daft Punk's like my all-time favorite group, duo, artist, band.
So did you cry a little bit when they
Yeah.
ended it? Yeah.
But we got this coming out. So
That's right.
and they're still doing stuff. Actually, Thomas he does a lot of classical stuff. So he's been releasing like classical, like orchestral stuff. Because that's what he composes, and they're like geniuses.
I was definitely curious if they were going to come back because they're working on a third Tron movie.
Oh, really?
And I was definitely curious if they were going to come back for
That'd be sick.
that.
Bring it together.
Yeah,
They might if the dollars are right.
Yes.
it's true.
Yeah,
I'm sure
George
they did.
Washington is very persuasive.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure they made off well in the first one.
Right,
so.
right.
Great.
Sick.
I'll let those albums stand for today. But
great.
thanks again to our sponsor, Quickwater Coffee, and
Yes.
Steven over there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Josh at Local Legend Recording for letting us record in your lobby as always.
Mhm.
Thank you, Keith, as well.
Thanks for having me. This
Yeah,
was great.
Absolutely.
Love it.
And thank you guys for sticking with us
Mhm.
all of this time.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Boom.